this is Joe Morse. You are listening to the History of Aviation podcast with Derrick Beeler, David Rowe, and David Gorman.
Hello and welcome to the History of Aviation podcast. I'm Derrick Beeler. Thanks so much for joining us on today's episode 22. We have a great aircraft for you today, the Boeing. Bleh. Here we go again, boys. Hello and welcome to the History of Aviation podcast. I'm Derrick Beeler. Thanks so much for joining us on today's episode 22. We have a great aircraft for you today, the Boeing V-22 Osprey.
It is indeed. Oh shit!
We're batting 1,000.
You even said
Read
the
script, Gorman.
You even said the script. That's what I'm saying.
Plane spotter. Oh, you got me. Hang on.
The giggles have taken over.
Okay.
Oh, man.
All right. Let's see here. Well, one of my problems is I did not print my script, so I've got it up on my screen because I don't have a printer at home, so I printed it. All right, here we go. 1, 2, 3. Are y'all getting that? I've got some issues going on here.
I can hear it.
I can hear the music.
All right.
Yep.
Okay. Must be the storms or something. All right. 1, 2, 3. Aviation enthusiast, plane spotter, graphic designer, Mr. David Rowe. How you doing, David?
I'm doing very well. Thank you very much. A little rainy today, a little sunshine mixed in, but otherwise doing well. Spent the weekend in Charlotte, made a stop at the Overlook and watched some airplanes take off, and got some video and some pictures that I'll have up eventually on my Aerophile website. So good weekend for me, a little aviation in it.
Aviation enthusiast, plane spotter, science teacher, Mr. Dave Gorman. How's it going, Dave?
Well, it's going great, and especially when you follow your cues. Had not a ton of aviation in my week, but busy week nonetheless. Doing some things, hanging out with some friends, taking my wife down to Atlanta and picking her up again. But man, looking forward to this discussion because when we talk about awesome things to see fly, this one is going to be at the top of the list for most people. This is going to draw a crowd wherever it is.
Yeah, no doubt, because it looks unlike about anything else you'll see in the skies with those big giant prop rotors sticking out there. It's something to see, and it sounds different, looks different, and it's an exciting thing to finally get to see.
I got to tell you, I don't remember the first time I saw one, but I remember just, open mouth, just like, oh my God, look at this thing, because it was huge. And that's an awful lot of moving parts to, the propellers themselves are huge. What's the diameter on those things? Something like 40 feet, I think.
Yeah, I think it's 38 feet. Yeah, they're huge.
So monstrous. And then to have the nacelles that rotate and everything. I mean, it's an ambitious design and, one that was marked with some controversy as it was being tested and developed and everything. But it is a very secure, stable platform and does its job very, very well. Can't wait to learn some more about the Osprey with you guys.
Yeah, absolutely. This was one of those aircraft that kind of eluded me for a long time. I've seen them fly over. I've taken pictures of them flying over, and for years just never saw one in person up close. And then in 2021 at the Great Tennessee Air Show, They had one on the static display, and luckily for me, they had one that was there to bring parts in to repair. So I actually got to see it fly up close. So that was my first time being up close and getting video and pictures and actually seeing an Osprey up close. So it's a new one for me. I haven't seen it very much or very often.
It's pretty wild to see how it taxis and moves along the runway. I mean, and it really is a bulky airplane. It's a lot bigger in real life than you might think, and has a lot of interesting features and bulges and stuff that you're like, what is that? You know, different antennas and portholes, that gun platform in the back. I mean, it does a lot of roles.
Yeah, that's one of the great things about it is it is literally, infiltration, exfiltration, air assault, aerial refueling, troop transport, cargo transport, medical evacuation, search and rescue. I think it does anti-submarine, or it's capable of anti-submarine. I mean, it's just wildly capable. Lots of things you can stuff in. Oh, the other thing is with the refueling, they just put bladders into the hold and run a cord out the back of the machine. That they just put the ramp down and run the drogue chute out. So I mean, it's highly capable.
So it can refuel other aircraft that way.
Absolutely, it can refuel jets. It's fast enough to refuel fighter jets. So that's one of the features that makes it more capable than your typical helicopter, because it can keep up.
Yeah, it makes you wonder if, with all, again, there were some developmental issues that we'll talk about, I'm sure. But with all of that, it seems like this was an aircraft that has been adapted to all those roles. And maybe some of those weren't necessarily foreseen in the early days. But you mentioned about rescue, and the need for the Osprey was something that kind of grew out of an awful experience that we had in Iran. Actually, I think it was in the Egyptian desert when we were trying to rescue some hostages, right?
Correct. It was Operation Eagle Claw when they were trying to rescue the hostages in the embassy in Iran. And things apparently went very badly in the desert, and I believe there were some people killed. And it just
there were
helicopters
that collided with C-130s, at a staging area, and loss of several airframes and a loss of several crew. We just didn't have the capacity, the capability of flying long distance and then doing those type of insertion missions with precision. And so what I understood is that the Osprey kind of grew out of those discussions, like, what do we need if something like that could ever happen again? What would it take to be able to pull off that type of success?
Yeah, that's exactly what it was. The military saw the need for something that could land like a helicopter, but yet fly like an airplane. And they created a request for, designs. And I was reading that there were like 4 or 5 different people, Aerospatiale, Bell Helicopter, Boeing Vertol, Grumman, Lockheed, and Westland were all interested in doing it. But actually only Bell and Boeing put in a design. And that was the V-15 tilt rotor that Bell had worked on many years before. They decided to do an upsized version of that. And because they were the only ones, the military said, all right, develop it, give us a design. And that's where it started.
So the idea of tilt rotors wasn't brand new with the XV-15. There were some earlier tilt rotor designs that were tried out and on very limited experimental bases, right?
Yeah, that's very correct. A lot of like ducted fan types, giant rings with propellers inside of that, and the whole wing would rotate. So those are tilt wings as opposed to a tilt rotor. So that it was not a new idea. People had been trying it, but this is literally the first successful introduction of a tilt rotor into actual use.
And again, as we mentioned, seeing that actually transition from takeoff to forward movement is just fascinating. And then watching it come back and land like a helicopter. And it has no choice. It has to land like a helicopter because those rotors are not going to clear the ground if they were in the if the nacelles were in the forward position there, right?
That's correct. Yeah, it has to land as a helicopter would land vertically. But you were talking about the transition. It takes about 12 seconds for it to transition from hover into vertical flight for those nacelles to turn. So it's a very quick transition.
I've always been fascinated by helicopter flight, mostly because I don't understand it very well. But the idea that the blade is a wing, and adjusting the angle of attack and creating lift that lifts up and instead of pulling or pushing an aircraft straight ahead, this aircraft has the best of both worlds though, with that fully adjustable ability. Now, but the nacelles are they're connected together, right? Don't they have a drive shaft or something that keeps them so that they're going to be in the same position? You're not going to have one nacelle that's going to be forward and the other one slightly less forward, right? They're going to be basically oriented the same way.
Well, yes and no. They are connected by a drive shaft, and so it's like a Chinook. They're always rotating at the same time in the same direction, the same way. It's basically, mechanically inhibited from, they don't run independent. So you can't run the throttle up on one and the other side not match. They always match. As a matter of fact, you can run the Osprey on one engine, but what I was reading is it's not very easy to land it on one engine. It does not it's just not enough power. But I do believe that the nacelles will tilt independent of each other. So if you're going to turn in a circle, you can have one slightly move forward and have the aircraft rotate around. So they're not
actually
locked. Yeah, I believe that because I was reading it to go backwards, the nacelles will tilt back to 97.4 degrees. So that's how it goes backwards, is they tilt back. And if I remember correctly, it's kind of like pedals. You push one in and the other kind of goes back a little bit and it will twist it around.
Gotcha. Again, lots of developmental issues, and there really seemed to be an effort early on to kill this aircraft. And I mean, it was doing a good job of killing itself, actually, with some of the incidences that it had. But this aircraft did not have widespread support, did it?
No, the military wanted it, but I think they kind of got tired of the cost, of the time it was taking. It was introduced in 1989, and it wasn't until 2007 that it actually reached operational status. So you've got a 15, 16-year period there of working on development and fixing problems and cost overruns. But the government, Congress said, no, we want this. And I'm sure there were some, very happy senators and states with the, where they were building these things that enjoyed that. But yeah, they kept it going and they kind of perfected it over time. It just, it's a new airframe. It's a new type of airplane. So of course it's going to have a lot of, teething problems and, things that the engineers just don't expect until it actually happens.
Well, and you're talking about how it's been used. This is also carrier borne, and it has the ability to fold up even tighter, can it, to fit on a carrier?
That is correct. It takes 90 seconds for the blades to fold back, and then the entire wing assembly twist 90 degrees so that it's the same direction as the fuselage, and that is all so that it will fit inside an aircraft carrier.
So
That was one of
basically, it really shrinks its profile so it would fit on the deck of a carrier or underneath in the aircraft hangar, right?
Yeah, I mean, it's just like all Navy aircraft. They have to have folding wings to fit
Yeah.
within, the limited space that they have.
Well, what branches of the service use this aircraft?
The Marine Corps, first
in
and
U.S.
foremost.
service. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, and that's another thing we'll talk about. The United States Marine Corps are the most, I think they have almost 400 units in service. The Air Force and the Navy both have about 40 or 50 units that they have. So those are the main users of it. Obviously, the Marine Corps with their air assault and troop carrying, that's their big thing. The other one is Japan actually flies the Osprey. So they have, I'm not exactly sure how many they've got now, but they are an actual user. I saw some pictures of an Osprey and, with the Japanese colors and national insignia on it. I believe Israel is in the works to get some. I don't know that they have gotten any yet. So not a lot of people, but all three main services of the U.S. military use it.
So Marines, Air Force, and Navy, right?
Correct.
Yeah. I bet the Coast Guard would love to get their hands on one, but maybe not right away.
Well, they don't really have a need for troop carrying. It's,
But it'd look cool in orange and white, wouldn't it?
Yes, it would. It would be highly visible.
Well, so you mentioned the Marines have about 400 of these. And there's some that are based not too far from where we are here in Tennessee, right? Aren't there a bunch based over in North Carolina?
Yes, New River.
Yeah, Marine Corps Air Station there.
Yes,
and I think there's some out in is it Camp Pendleton? Is that still a thing out in California? There's a bunch that are based out on the West Coast as well, of course.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah, I did not look up the West Coast. I just saw what was on the East Coast.
And Derrick, you were saying before the show, we were talking a little bit about this aircraft, about occasionally seeing these guys coming into McGee Tyson here in Knoxville, right?
Occasionally, yes.
Yeah, and I mentioned they always draw a crowd. Boy, there's a buzz when these things come in because they are such a unique aircraft, and they are loud as crap. And it's cool, again, to see things that are that big, the nacelles and just rotating and moving and on liftoff. I mean, they can do conventional rolling takeoffs. They don't just take off like a helicopter every time. In fact, that's, they can. And sometimes at air shows they will. But I think operationally they're rolling out and transitioning and getting up and on their way pretty quickly. But man, oh man, they're cool to see.
Yeah, they usually take off in a STOL, short takeoff and landing configuration. So they roll out and then just pop up off the ground. And as a matter of fact, speaking of seeing them, there is an airport about 60 miles up the road from me in Virginia, Mountain Empire Airport. They regularly get Ospreys stopping in there for refueling. I follow them on Facebook, and once, twice a week, they'll post pictures, 2 or 3 Ospreys landing, taxiing in, being refueled. I mean, it's just like, 60 miles, come a little bit closer. I'd love to see you down here in the Tri-Cities.
Mm-hmm.
But they're local. They do travel through this area quite a bit.
Mountain Empire is the one that's right parallel to I-81, isn't it?
That's correct. You, as you drive by, you can just look over and see the entire airfield. It's generally not very busy, but of late they've had a lot of Osprey visits.
Boy, it would be good to get some advance notice and get up there because you'd see them coming from several miles away, and we'll get some great shots.
Definitely.
Oh, absolutely. I would love to see that. So one day we'll just have to go sit and see what we can see.
Sit and wait. Well, it's a beautiful place to do it. So it's good of them to update you after the fact that they've been there, but maybe we can get a little advance notice.
Well,
do we have that kind of pull
fingers
yet?
crossed.
Derrick,
No, sir, I do not.
Well, let's send a couple of shirts over to the squadron and see if they'll hook us up with some advance notice of arrivals.
That would work for sure. Yeah, I like it.
That would work. So I was thinking about you mentioned about the capability to aerial refuel, and the Osprey can be refueled in air itself, correct?
Yes, it can. Absolutely.
And we have some listeners and some friends who take a lot of pictures. They shoot a lot of shots of refueling in action over East Tennessee, which is always cool to see. I remember 20 years ago, the first time I ever looked up and saw it, or 25 years ago, the first time I ever saw it, just happened to look up. I didn't hear it. I just happened to look up, and at about 10,000 feet, I saw a refueling hookup over the University of Tennessee. I was like, oh my God, I can't believe I'm seeing it. But I wonder, and Bruce will chime in online, I'm sure, because he usually does, if anybody has caught an Osprey in either the refueling or refueler mode over East Tennessee. That would be a cool picture to see.
For sure.
Yeah, absolutely.
I'm kind of guessing he hasn't, because we'd all hear about it many times. So.
More than likely, yes. But yeah, somebody's seen it. We just need to find out who it is.
Well, I have vacationed over in the Outer Banks before, not in a few years. And I have a friend who goes down to Destin regularly, and you see these guys doing training missions along the coast in both areas, which is it's just cool to see something that big beating up the bushes. Well, not quite the bushes, but flying over at 500 feet over the water, and just it's just awesome. I love seeing it. And usually there'll be 3 or 4 that are flying together. So.
Something interesting. You're talking about it beating up. I was reading that those propellers, as they're spinning around, they produce winds of about 90 miles per hour coming down, the downwash, which is literally hurricane speed winds coming off of the downwash of those blades. That's the kind of power that they're putting out, that you cannot exit the aircraft from the sides. Like in a normal C-130 or something, you can go out a side door to parachute out. You can't do that in an Osprey, because that downwash is so powerful that you'd be beat to death or knocked back in. That's why all of the if they're jumping or rappelling or doing that fast rappel, that's all done from the back off of that lower deck. They can't go out the sides. You have to go out the back.
Well, let's hope that they didn't learn that the hard way.
Well, yeah, exactly.
Goodness. I think I read something also that there have been some issues with wake vortices, that they had to do some more studying because of trailing aircraft that were being impacted by that wind that was coming off those rotors in flight.
Well, I mean, they're 38 feet and they're putting out a massive amount of air. So, of course, I think, what was it? At least 25 feet separation between them. That's as close as you can get to 2 aircraft together.
It seems awful close anyways. Yeah. Goodness.
So, yeah, a lot of that. It's a new thing. It's a new concept. It's a new way of doing it. So they're learning on the fly as they, practice and exercises. A brownout, that when the helicopter lands in the dust or the sand and it kicks it up, those pilots have to learn how to land in a brownout where they literally can't see. They have to trust their instruments as they're landing.
That can't be easy on the engines either.
No, absolutely not. The Rolls-Royce engines, as a matter of fact, they're in the process of upgrading those, I was reading. But yeah, I mean, it's, all new. Oh, that's another thing. So when they tilt those, the nacelles and they're vertical, the exhaust is in the bottom. So it's putting the exhaust down on the ground. That's what creates those, the wind and the heat and everything. Well, they have to be careful on the aircraft carriers because the heat from those engines is melting the decks. They're having to look at new materials, new coatings to work on those decks because the bottom of the nacelle is so close to the ground that it's actually melting decks. So that's a new thing. I was reading the F-35 has the same problem where it's in a hover mode. They have to be careful where they land it because they generate so much heat on the deck that it's literally melting the decks.
I'm sure that in development right now are some new coatings and materials that will be put on aircraft carriers in the next few years.
Yeah, absolutely.
Just to withstand that.
Progress.
There was a video that was leaked, I guess, last year that showed an accident, a Osprey that was coming aboard a carrier and was coming up maybe sideways over the side of the carrier. And as the downdraft from the first rotor that came over the deck of the ship, when it came over the deck of the ship, all of a sudden it had an unequal amount of downdraft because the rotor that was still out over the water was pushing further down, and all of a sudden the deck of the ship was a lot closer on one side than the other, and it created an unequal an imbalance of downward thrust, and apparently caused it to crash. Do you remember seeing that video?
Oh yeah, absolutely remember it. It's pretty amazing because like you said, it's coming in normally, and then all of a sudden one side dips, and it's lost its control from that point on. It's a very delicate balance to land these aircraft, and I'm sure they changed tactics and the way they land. They probably have to come in higher and drop in or something.
Approaching.
I'm sure changes were made. Yeah.
Absolutely. I guess I was also surprised to see the ceiling. For this aircraft is about 25,000 feet. I did not realize that. So,
yeah, but now it is an unpressurized aircraft. So if they get above 10,000 feet, they have to wear oxygen masks.
Yeah,
it's not pressurized. So if you're at 21,000, it's not an easy flight.
Probably kind of miserable. But what a ride indeed!
Yeah.
And again, this is a favorite air show performer, and I'll be heading up to Oshkosh here in about 2 months, and no, I'm sorry, here in about a month and a half or so. And they usually have them up there, and oftentimes there'll be more than one. They'll have some combat maneuvering and some things that they'll be doing that just shows how a couple of them would come in and overfly and then secure the perimeter, just flying over and then hovering and then landing, and then troops who are jumping out, Marines jumping out and securing the area. So it's really cool to see, and just great noise. Always cool videos, and it's just great. I love everything about this plane.
Yeah, I do too. I was just remembered something. We were talking about the downwash and 90 miles an hour. One of the things I did not know is that this being a tilt rotor, the wing stays level, and so as the tilt rotor goes up, it actually loses down. The downwash is blocked by the wing, and so it loses a little bit of its lift, about 10%, because that wing is blocking the air going down. If it were a tilt wing, so that the wing turned, it wouldn't have that issue. But because that wing is in the way, it actually loses a little bit of its power. First time I had read that, and I was like, well, that makes total sense, but just hadn't thought of it before.
Yeah, that wing is right in the way.
Yeah, absolutely. Just block some of the down.
Well, I was able to see the XV-15, the demonstrator precursor that was developed several years before the Osprey that Bell developed and NASA flew in the 80s and into the early 90s. And they had one that flew at the Dayton Air Show in 1990. And so I was able to see it there and also take some video of it. So, Derrick, I'll send that link to you. We can perhaps share the link to that video if anybody wants to see it. I'll give you the time tag so you can see the XB-15 fly. It's pretty cool. Much smaller than the Osprey, but you definitely can look at it and tell how they're related, how they're cousins. They built two. One crashed, and they used parts of it for training. The other one is on display in the Smithsonian at Udvar Hazy at Dulles Airport. So it's pretty cool to see. Mm-hmm. And we do have, considering this is a contemporary aircraft, there are some of these that are on display at various museums. The Air Force Museum up in Dayton has one. And I remember it was a pretty big deal when that, it was a pretty big deal when it flew in and they put it on display because they were really happy to get one there.
Yeah, there's actually not very many. I think there's one in Maryland, there's one in North Carolina, and one in Pennsylvania, and then the one in Ohio. But other than that, I didn't see that there were a lot of them, I guess because it's still active duty and they haven't really retired that many of them yet. So
right.
There's a few out there to be seen.
Indeed. And you mentioned active duty. This plane has seen combat. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Yes, it has been in Iraq and Iran, Libya. It has participated in several, air rescues. It's been, disaster relief. It's been used in all the major, disaster reliefs in the last 10 years or so. It's just highly capable, carries in a lot of material. So yeah, it's used quite a bit now.
Yeah, I think I saw cargo of close to like 20,000 pounds or something that it could carry internally. And I think being the Marine Corps aircraft, they also have provisions for slinging cargo underneath of it as well, right?
That is correct. It can carry some small Jeeps. It's like a Growler is, I think, what they called it. It looks like a small modern Jeep. So it's, we can't put any big equipment in it, but small stuff easily. You can get about 30 troops in there, 24 seated and about 32, I think, just standing. So, I mean, it can carry quite a load of people and material.
It sure is an awesome aircraft. And again, one that I rush out to go see whenever I know they're nearby. And if you're a fan of the ADSB website or app, Ospreys are always fun to look at because they have two icons. And you could tell it's an Osprey, but you could also tell the icon switches the direction of the blades as it transitions to forward flight. You can tell because the icon changes to show that. When it's in a hover, the icon shows the blades straight up. So it's really cool to see.
Yeah, absolutely. Did you know that this, we were talking about earlier, it has a machine gun on the back at the ramp. Did you know that they actually have a Gatling gun style gun underneath? That is an optional thing that you can put on these. It's a GAU-17 minigun, belly mounted, retractable video remote control. It's called an interim defense weapon system, IDWS. I did not know that I knew about the guns on the back at the ramp. I had seen those, but not one that was remotely controlled underneath.
Goodness, we'll have to look for that next time we see one. Do you know who actually mans or controls that? Is that the co-pilot or?
Not exactly sure. That they had the Osprey has a crew of up to 4. So you got a pilot, co-pilot, and 2, engineer, load handling type people.
Loadmaster,
Loadmasters, exactly. Thank you. So I'm not sure who has the responsibility for the gun. I would assume one of the pilots does, but I don't know that for sure. The other thing I saw was the Osprey is used as a presidential aircraft. It is a part of the HMX-1 Marine Helicopter Squadron 1 presidential support. So it can carry the president, vice president, senators, congress people, press, whatever is required. So they have special colors. So it's used for presidential support.
That's awesome. I seem to remember that we had one that was painted in those colors that came into McGee Tyson a year or two ago, and everybody went nuts getting pictures of that. Other trivia, and David, I know you know this, but I like it. And you haven't mentioned it, so I'm going to steal it from you, perhaps. But there was an infamous person whose last flight ever was in an Osprey. He didn't live to see the flight because he'd been killed. Actually, his last flight was when they dumped him off the deck of the aircraft carrier into the deep blue sea. But previously, his last flight from Pakistan after we killed Osama bin Laden was aboard an Osprey. So
that is correct. Flew him out to the Carl Vinson in the Arabian Sea. So, yep, that's on my notes.
It's interesting because we watched the Zero Dark 30, and you see that the insertion of the team that went in after him had a mission profile that was kind of similar with this insertion, like with helicopters, and then bugging the heck out of there. I guess. It was too dicey and maybe untested to try to bring an Osprey in for that type of thing, but similar type of need.
Yeah, absolutely. Just mission requirements decide what works best, and apparently that wasn't the case here.
Well, this is a very adaptable aircraft, and there are probably, as always, other roles that haven't yet been disclosed. There's special forces that operate this aircraft, so. The addition of that minigun was something that it wasn't designed with, and that probably grew out of some needs. And somebody thinking, well, what would happen if we did this? Necessity being the mother of invention. So there may be other things that we'll see that are hooked up to, attached to, bolted onto an Osprey coming to you at an air show, hopefully soon.
Yes, definitely. I was reading it's got over 700,000 flight hours. So they're spent a lot of time in the air with this aircraft. It's gotten a lot of use in the last few years. So it's, not a spring chicken. It's had its time in the air. I think I was reading somewhere they expect another 30 years life out of them. So they're going to be around for a good long while.
Well, guys, as we're talking about the V-22 Osprey on this episode 22 of the History of Aviation podcast, let's jump into closing thoughts, starting with you, Dave Gorman.
Well, it must sound like every plane is my favorite plane, I realize, but there are some that are just truly iconic and truly groundbreaking designs, and this is something I remember watching. With just awe, watching that XV-15 fly 33 years ago, and then to actually see an Osprey, the big brother of that thing, flying and become operational and overcoming. I mean, you got to root for this plane. It's been through a lot, and
for sure.
It's not unusual for aircraft to go through testing to failure. But this aircraft had failures that were just bugs that when you've got a new system, there are things that come up. And they did. And it was unfortunate. And a lot of brave people lost their lives helping to develop this plane, unfortunately. It's moved past a lot of things, but it is still inherently dangerous to be flying combat aircraft. And my hat's off to the crew members, the men and women of the armed forces that fly this magnificent plane. I've enjoyed it every time I've seen it, and I still am like a little kid looking at it like, God, this is amazing. What a noise. So thank you for this suggestion. This was a great one to learn about.
David Rowe.
I agree completely with that. This is a completely unique aircraft. There's just nothing else in the world that does what it can do. It's basically a first generation aircraft. I was thinking about this. We've got fighters that we call fifth generation and sixth generation. I mean, this is first generation tilt rotor. We are just now learning what's the capabilities of this aircraft in this format of flying. As a matter of fact, the Black Hawk is going to be replaced by a Bell tilt rotor called the Valor. So that'll be a second generation. So we'll see what the new capabilities that are coming that they have learned from the Osprey. It's just, the military has latched onto it, has turned it into a great machine. And like I said, it's going to be around for another 20, 30 years. So expect to see it around a lot. And I look forward to the next time I can catch one flying over or at an air show, because like you said, they have a sound that's not like much anything else. And they're just fun to look at. So great airplane.
That's probably something they would like to change, get it a little bit quieter. So we may see some improvements on, the next generation tilt rotor, because it's tough to sneak up on you at an Osprey.
Well, like the C-130 has gone from straight blades to those scimitar blades. Who's to say that they can't do something like that here?
Exactly.
There's all kind of first generation. We're just now seeing it start. It will be different, 10, 20 years down the road.
It always is. But great choice, Derrick.
Thank you.
Yes, thank you.
I'd actually been thinking about this one since we started, and I thought this is the perfect opportunity to do the Osprey.
Episode 22 and the V-22. Look at you.
Exactly. Well, guys, let's talk a little bit about social media here, starting with you, David Rowe.
Aerophile.com, AEROWEPHILE.com. Pictures, videos, YouTube, Instagram, Twitter, Facebook. I've got all kinds of stuff, a lot of warbirds from the commemorative Air Force visit I had a couple of weeks back, B-29 bombers, P-51 Mustangs, and upcoming I've got A320, 737s, 777s, and a Lufthansa A350 takeoff coming from my visit to Charlotte this past weekend. So look for that coming up soon on Aerophile.
You mean you had time? You had time, David, to get out to the airport and take video too? That's amazing.
You make time. You make time. You
most certainly do, my friend. Well, you can find me on Instagram at _Dave Gorman, or it's Dave Gorman. You can look at my videos, Gormania videos on YouTube. Just put up a bunch of music ones. I saw some shows recently and added some of those. But if you go a little bit deeper, I've got some videos from the Smyrna Air Show. They're all cell phone videos, so they're not anywhere near as good looking as Mr. Rowe's, but they're still there. So if you want to see a F-22 flyby at high speed, or see the Navy Heritage flight with a pair of F-35s and a Corsair, there are other places you can find them. But I have my version of them too. So. But thanks for checking those out, guys.
Good deal. In the history of aviation, gosh, Dave Gorman, we're everywhere, aren't we?
You don't have to look hard to find us, but we can make it easier, and you can make it easier. We do have some merch that we hope to be offering soon, right? What do we have?
We have T-shirts and stickers, and the merch store will be open on the 28th. Will be officially open.
Cannot wait. I told you I wore my History of Aviation podcast T-shirt to the Smyrna Air Show, and had a person come up and engage with me immediately and ask me about it. And I said, take a picture so you can remember the name. And her son, who was 10 or 11 years old at his very first air show, was very enthusiastic. So I hope they're listening, and if they are, that they'll reach out. If they are, Derrick, I would love to take responsibility for sending that kid a shirt if we hear from them. Okay,
definitely, we'll do it.
Yeah, we got stickers too, right?
We got stickers, we got shirts, we got stickers, and they are we're going to have the merch store open the 28th. So we're looking forward to that. And we'll make a big announcement, let everybody know when the merch store is open, when you can go on there and get your shirt and stickers.
Do you have anything with a sticker on it, Derrick?
I do.
There it is.
How about that?
There's the logo. And man, that's a great looking logo. Who designed that?
That would be Mr. Our own David Rowe.
Man, multi-talented. He does it all. So that looks great.
Trying.
Indeed, indeed.
Well, guys, thanks so much. I enjoyed it.
Absolutely. Had a great time.
Thank you again.
Another great discussion here on the History of Aviation podcast. And to our listeners, thank you so much. We hope you enjoyed it. Please do drop us a line down below and let us know what you think. Leave some comments, leave some feedback. For David Rowe, Dave Gorman, I'm Derrick Beeler. Thanks for listening to the History of Aviation podcast.
This is Joe Morse. You are listening to the History of Aviation podcast with Derrick Beeler, David Rowe, and David Gorman.